There's a well-known spiritual joke that goes like this. How does a Buddhist order a pizza? He says, make me one with everything. And so this episode is all about oneness. What does it actually mean to be one with everything? We're going to talk about oneness from a lot of different angles, philosophical, scientific, and of course spiritual. And in this episode, we're also going to do a deep dive into the concept of consciousness, because you can't really understand oneness without understanding something about consciousness as well. We talk about all the benefits that a life of oneness has, because if you develop oneness, then you can conquer jealousy, you can overcome feelings of loneliness, you add much more meaning to your life, and you feel much more connected to the world around you. And we also talk about different strategies of how to develop oneness. So it's an episode with a lot of practical takeaways as well. We recorded our episode in the town of Avon, Colorado, where me and Vajin and some of our mutual friends were vacationing for a week, and we had a wonderful time. We did a lot of running, exploring the mountains, and the episode is shot actually from our hotel room there. So I hope you enjoy this episode, and see you next time.
So there's a great concept when you're talking about God or the divine in the Eastern tradition. There's this great idea called neti, which means not this, not this. And it's often easier to explain something that's transcendent, something that is beyond the ordinary world we live in. Sometimes it's easier to explain it by the things that it is not.
Oh yeah, and when they say neti, not this, they're talking about, what is that?
They're talking about the divine, like the true absolute Brahman, God himself. He is not this, and he is not this.
Yeah, I think what they mean is that he is one. So whenever you have an experience that is not all oneness, you say it's not this.
Yeah.
So you're in your ordinary consciousness and you're experiencing yourself as separate from others. You say neti. It's not this, it's not this.
Yeah, and it's beyond all of the things. It's beyond everything.
Yeah.
And so that's the thing with oneness, is that oneness in some ways is a transcendent experience. It's an experience beyond our limited individual self.
But isn't it so that by the practice of constantly saying it's not this, it's not this, they thought that they would arrive at eventual oneness, right? Just by repeating what it's not, then all of that would fall away from their conscious mind. Then they would eventually arrive at the perfect
exactly
oneness.
Because you're trying to remove your attachment to the wrong things. Mm-hmm. And the first thing I'd say about oneness is oneness in some ways is the answer to so many of the problems that people are suffering from in the modern world.
Yeah.
So for me, when I look around in reality and I see people suffering, some of the biggest causes of suffering in the modern world is loneliness, separation, isolation. And these are all the exact opposite of what oneness is.
Yeah.
And so it's very difficult for people who are in those states of suffering and feeling isolated. They're feeling disconnected. They're feeling a lack of wholeness within themselves. They're feeling as though there's something missing. And very often the solutions that are offered to them are never really going to truly solve the problem, because the solutions are rooted in the same reality that is causing the problem.
So what kind of solutions are you talking about?
So, I mean, if someone is feeling isolated and disconnected and feeling just a deep sense of maladaptation to reality, you can tell them, oh, well, you should try this and you can try this, you should join some groups, you should do that. But if the state of being that you are coming from is causing the problem, then just by changing your outer circumstances, it's not going to solve the problem. It's
so just being part of a community, but that can also be a good solution for loneliness, isn't it?
Oh,
I feel part of a community.
Definitely, but you can still feel incredibly lonely when you're surrounded by other people.
Well, that's true.
So sometimes that's the worst type of loneliness, when there's a sense that nobody understands you. There's a sense that there's some separation, that even when you're right there with people, you can't get across that sense of separateness. And I think that's really painful for people.
Yeah, so it seems that all those solutions, even joining a community or feeling part of a community, they can kind of treat the symptoms of loneliness. Yeah. I can maybe feel a little bit uplifted at those times, but it doesn't go to the root problem of loneliness.
No, because the root problem is a fundamental misunderstanding of the nature of reality in the universe. It's a sense of feeling as though you are somehow here as a stranger in a strange land. And it's this idea that people often talk about, that we've come into the world, we've somehow from some other realm have popped into this world. And that can easily, if you believe that that is the nature of reality, you can easily feel that, oh, it's so weird here. No one understands me and I understand no one.
Yeah.
And I think oneness is one of the deep and profound ideas that can actually begin to transform that experience of being a stranger in a strange land, to actually starting to understand and see that there is a deep and profound connection between everything. And
Well, I think that we have had that experience very much when we were children. So I think in our childhood, when you're a child, when you're anywhere between the ages of, let's say, 3 and 8 or 9 years old, you have not yet developed the sophisticated mind, right? The rational mind, the mind that reasons, and the mind that divides and separates reality.
Yeah.
And children very much live in the heart. So, what is so endearing about children is that they can come up to anyone, any stranger, and immediately it's their best friend. So they don't even know the concept of a stranger. That's because they live in this almost paradisical state of oneness. So for children, there's no strangers. Everybody they can approach and they can talk to, and they feel that it's completely normal. And as adults, of course, we've developed this kind of mental consciousness, the mind. And the nature of the mind is to divide, right? To separate. That's where also one of the problems start. And you see this with children when they reach the age of, let's say, 10, 11, 12 years old. That is when the mind starts to function, right? The reasoning mind starts to be born at that age. And also you see that the behavior of children starts to change in those ages. So before it was all oneness, they were all playing together, they would just have fun and joy. And then when they become 10, 11, 12 years old, just before adolescence, they start to compare. It's like, oh, the shoes that Johnny is wearing, I want those shoes, Mom. I want the same kind of clothing. And things like bullying and being part of the group and not being part of the group. Children start to look around and see how others are behaving. And that's really, I think, the teachings of the reasoning or dividing mind that start to come into being at that age. But we all have lived in this paradisical state of oneness. So, and that goes to your point of, when we come into this world, we feel part of the world as children. When you have let's say a normal child, not a childhood of tremendous abuse, not a traumatic childhood, but as if we have a reasonably normal childhood, we feel part and parcel of the world. And we feel connected with all human beings, our parents, our friends, our classmates, and so-called strangers. So that's beautiful to see that we do come into this world already with a sense of oneness. And we kind of lose that as we age.
Yeah, and then that's one of the things that you see in life, that very often the lessons that we're looking for is the unlearnings.
Yeah.
It's the unlearning of all of the habits and ideas that we've picked up that have separated us from others and from those initial states of experience of the world. So let's try and figure out a little bit about what oneness is.
Okay.
And as we've done around some other topics, I think one of the ways that we can see that something has some transcendent reality, there's a realness to it that is deep and profound, is if we can find multiple ways to get to this idea, and we can see then that there's something about it that is transcendent. So
what do you mean by that?
So we're gonna let's talk about some different ways we can think about oneness. So from example, a practical sense, a more abstract sense, a more philosophical sense.
Sure.
But just look at it from different ways, a scientific way. Yeah. And if we can, from all of those different directions, we can see that there's a reality there that seems true and real and valuable.
Yeah. And works in the world.
And yeah, exactly. And has some fundamental practicality.
Well, yes, I also would like to talk later about strategies how to develop oneness. Of course, we talk about it. What is it? It's very interesting. And also, we want to know how can we, get more oneness into our daily lives and make it practical.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that as well.
Yeah. So let's start with what are we talking about when we talk about oneness? So what we were saying was it's the opposite of that experience of separation, of loneliness, of disconnection. So in some ways, it's a fundamental sense of being connected with reality around us in some profound and deeper level. And in some ways, it's the experience where we expand beyond our limited identity. So when we are trapped within our own minds and our own identity of the character that we've been acting out and all of the experiences that we've had, it's always keeping us separate from the world around us. It's never really allowing us to connect with other people, with situations around us, or even to really experience the world.
So what do you mean by the character of who we are?
So that identity that we carry around with us, which is based on the experiences we've had and all of the memories and all of the information we've taken in some way we take on an identity. So that the identity is that I'm good at this, I'm not good at that, I'm good at sports, but I'm not good at poetry.
Right.
And
It's your
I like
personality,
this and I like this.
Personality and ego?
Yeah, no, I like the idea of identity because it's the thing, experiences we've had that we somehow carry around an identification with those things. We feel as though, you know, that I identify with these objects and these types of things in the world, and it gives us a sense of our character or who.
Yeah, that's not necessarily good or bad. Just is because a construct.
Yeah,
it's maybe not the reality.
Yeah,
the ultimate reality.
But when we experience true oneness is when we start to go beyond that identification, that character. We start to expand ourselves beyond just this form that I'm inhabiting, and we start to connect with the world around us on much more of a heartfelt level. So we start to experience in the world in a sense of feeling rather than just seeing or listening or touching or tasting. We start to really feel the world, and that we start to experience the world, and we start to experience it more as it truly is, rather than how it is when simply filtered through our personality and our identity. So it's a transcendent experience because we're going beyond the small self, we're going beyond the limited self, and we're connecting to something beyond ourselves. And so for that to be true, what I would think is we'd have to see it acted out in human life. If that was actually true, if it was possible for us to transcend and go beyond our limited selves and connect with something more profound, something beyond ourselves, something vaster or something different from ourselves, we would see that would be something that human beings would be looking for.
Yeah, well, if I think about if you look at art, or you enjoy a piece of music, or you look at a painting that's beautiful, you can lose the sense of self in those moments, and you can be transported and experience transcendence in those moments. You know, you're touched, and you lose your sense of even of the present moment of where you are, and completely are wrapped inside this beautiful experience of maybe oneness with the piece of art that you're seeing or experiencing.
Yeah, and I think that's perfect, because I think if we look at all of the things that human beings truly love and really chase after, perhaps apart from wealth and money, but nearly everything else gives us a sense of expansion. It gives us a sense of going beyond ourselves. So whether it's from sex through to music, art, plays, movies, television, all of these things give us an opportunity or a way. We're looking for a way to transcend that separate sense of self. We're trying to connect with something more than ourselves. And so, for example, when I grew up, electronic music was a really big thing, and thousands of people would come together and dance. And what people are looking for in that experience is a sense of losing themselves in the music. And it's the same at a rock concert or any sort of large musical event. You're trying to have an experience, a transcendent experience, where you lose that limited sense of self and connect to a far bigger sense of self. You become part of that group. You become part of that shared experience that everyone is having.
And in a negative way, people also look for those experiences if they, through substance abuse, for instance, alcohol, drugs. And I think that can be very destructive, right? The alcohol, we know the problems that can create. But the reason people intoxicate themselves is also to lose themselves. Like, it's too painful to live with.
It's too painful to be stuck in that limited experience of self. Yeah. And we see it in all sorts of different groups. Like a good example would be football fans in Europe.
Yeah.
Everyone comes along and dresses in certain colors, and they all know the songs, and everyone is trying to lose themselves in some sort of group experience.
Yeah. But that's still an identity. That's then you're part of the group. So you've created a new identity.
Yeah, but you've tried to expand. You're like, this is too small. I feel too constricted, just as this limited.
But those forms can also be very aggressive. But hooligans, say, go out and and riot and destroy like a city, that is not very positive experience. It's not what we're looking for.
No.
In true ones. So
No.
it's not just expansion, right?
No. So it has to be pointed in a certain direction. And I think the oldest religious traditions in the world that came before anything else were the animistic traditions. And so the animistic traditions are the ancient shamanistic practices. And so these are the traditions where they saw that consciousness was in everything. So ancient people living in a world, they were living in a world where everything was alive with consciousness. So the river had a consciousness and spirit. The trees, each tree had a consciousness and spirit.
It's called panpsychism, right? It's
Yeah.
making a comeback.
Yeah. And so those people living in those cultures saw that they were part of something far greater than themselves. And the person who had the greatest knowledge of this was the shaman. And the shaman would use different traditions, but one of the strongest and the most transcendent traditions across all of these ancient cultures was sound and rhythm. And so you see the image of some ancient shamanic person playing a drum. And it's really interesting because I've actually looked at all of the shamanic traditions around the world. So right from like Siberia and regions like that, all the way through Africa, right down through to South America. And often the shamans will have a very similar set of practices across all of those different places. And so they were the people who really understood how to cross over from the limited self and connect with something beyond themselves. So they were seen as the ones who could connect with the spirit world. And so if there were problems or there were celebrations or anything very important and sacred needed to be done, the shaman would always be intimately involved. And one of their skills that they had was that they could enter into a state where they transcended their limited self and connected with this transcendent spirit world. And one of the ways that they would often do it was drumming. And across all of the shamanic traditions, they would often play these rhythms between 180 and 220 beats per minute. So like,
so it's quite specific.
Yeah, like three beats every set.
So,
And so it's really at the top range of someone's heart rate.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting how it was this, you're trying to raise the frequency, you're trying to raise the vibration. And this would allow them to enter into altered states of consciousness. And from there, they could receive information, they could receive visions. And what it would do as well is it still happens. I know in Morocco, I've spent some time there, and there's still a very strong musical shamanic tradition there in some way. And they will have people that will come together, and you will hire these musicians who will come and they will play all night. And they'll be playing these amazingly complex and fast rhythms, but really high rates for hours and hours. Like right from you pay them to come and they'll perform from the sunset all the way through to the sunrise.
So how do you explain that? Why do they get tired?
Yeah, this is the thing. In some way, they're entering into a transcendent state of consciousness.
Yeah.
And if you see the people in these states of consciousness, they're no longer the person they were before. They've connected with something beyond themselves.
And I have to think about children again. When children play, they can also play for hours. Like if children go out to play, they can play from dawn to dusk, without getting tired. So maybe that's also a feature of this state of consciousness, of this oneness, that you get also life energy, that you're supplied with a constant stream of energy. You're connected to something higher when you're in that state of oneness.
Yeah, and perhaps you're not just relying on your own capacities anymore. And you're not a separate part of some greater whole. You are that greater whole. You've surrendered some or given up some attachment to the individual self, and you've connected to that greater whole. And in that greater whole, there is tremendous potential. And so there's a couple of qualities of oneness that I wanted to touch on, looking at it from the spiritual point of view. So one of the real powers of oneness is this ability to have transcendent experiences. So to have experiences that connect us to something beyond ourselves. So we transcend the limited self. And these are often when people talk about the most important experiences in their lives. These are the types of experiences they often talk.
Spiritual experiences.
Yeah. And so for me, my first spiritual experience I had was when I was 15 and I had stayed overnight at a friend's house and I got up early and I was walking home. And I, at some point, just decided to stop and look and watch the sunrise over the hills. in my hometown. And I had my Walkman playing, and I had the radio station I was listening to was a student radio station. Overnight, it was playing the sound of the ocean. And so I had this wonderful moment of listening to the sound of the ocean and looking and seeing the sun rising over the hills. And in that moment, I felt this tremendous expansion inside myself. I felt like as though my heart opened and connected with the world around me in a way that I had never experienced before. And suddenly I felt as though I was no longer a separate, insignificant portion of consciousness or being. I instead was an integral part of the entire whole. And so
nobody had ever told you about this experience. So you were thrown into the deep end almost.
That's actually, and as I was breathing in, each time I breathed in, my consciousness would again expand. So I went from feeling this connection to the trees and the plants and the grass around me. Suddenly I was feeling this connection to the city. And then again, I was feeling the connection to the whole country. And then again, the next level up, I breathed in, I felt the connection to the whole world. And it just went up and up and up until I was feeling this tremendous sense of oneness. And inside that oneness was an incredibly profound sense of meaning. It felt as though in that moment that I understood the purpose of this experience and that I was an integral part of that experience. I was not some small, insignificant, being in the far reaches of space. I was intimately and integrally important in whatever was going on.
So if you talk about the meaning of life, that is kind of encapsulated in that kind of moment or experience.
Exactly.
You experience yourself as being one. That may be the meaning of life.
Yeah.
To be one with everything, with the entire world.
So that is perhaps the most profound level of experience that most people will ever have in their life. And some people might have it through different means, like we've talked about in the past. They may be in nature, or they may be doing something in the sporting world, and they'll have these moments where they really lose themselves in the activity they're doing, and they no longer feel like that limited sense of self. They instead feel this expansive sense of self. And it's everything seems to flow, and instead of having to force reality and force action just happens naturally and spontaneously through you. So that's something that we could all perhaps do with a little bit more of that in our lives.
Yeah, and we will talk about how we can, develop oneness in our lives.
Yeah,
but maybe look at it from another angle.
So the next thing I want to talk about is one of the things that people really struggle with now is really connecting with other people.
Yeah, loneliness is one of the main problems right now.
Yeah,
if you talk about mental health, people say that nowadays loneliness is the big, killer. It's the big problem that we face.
Yeah,
because I think in the old days the church was the center of the community, at least in the Western world, and of course in the Eastern world they had their own spiritual traditions. But the religions and spiritual traditions of the world very often provided the communities that people felt a part of.
Yeah.
And I guess people were more connected with their families back in the day. Families were larger, and there was more sense of, you're being part of a unit. And we've become more individualistic nowadays, which has definitely its benefits and its advantages, but also has some backlash. So yeah, we do live in an age where loneliness is a real problem.
Yeah. So I think if people can learn to try and expand their consciousness and identify with others, it is perhaps the most powerful way of actually feeling a real sense of connection. Instead of always interacting in the world as though everything and everyone is a stranger to you, through the practice of developing a sense of oneness and developing that ability to use our heart and expand ourselves, we can have much deeper and more profound connections with others.
Yeah, I'm burning with the question of how do we do that? But maybe first we'll continue the analysis.
Yeah. And then one of the other qualities of oneness, which I think is so beautiful, is that if we look at our own lives, there'll be certain achievements that we have in our lives, certain achievements that we're proud of, or great moments where we graduated from college, or we achieved an important milestone. But if you look at across the whole span of your life, you only have a small number of these great successes in your life. And so you may have won some prize at some event, or you may have got some scholarship, or whatever it is. There's only a finite number of these high successes you have.
Achievements, results, successes.
Yeah. And what you can do through actually understanding and living a life of oneness is that you actually start to expand yourself, and it allows you to celebrate others' successes as your own.
Wow, that sounds great.
And so instead of you being limited by the number of great successes you can have in your own life, if you can really expand and identify with others, with your family, with your friends, with your loved ones, with all of these people around you that you share a connection with.
Yeah.
It's one of the most beautiful things where we can learn to actually celebrate these successes as our own.
And I think for people that may sound a bit artificial, but we've all, I mean, if we talk about football fans earlier, I mean, football fans have the experience all the time when their team scores. I mean, I am a big fan of the Dutch national team.
Yeah.
So when I watch an important match and, the Dutch team scores, I'm so happy and thrilled and euphoric, when they win an important match. I'm just so thrilled. And it's not my achievement, but it feels like my achievement because I've identified myself with the country of the Netherlands. And then this sporting team I feel they represent us. And then, I mean, that's a very universal experience. That's why people in the Olympics, they cheer for their own country. And I think it's a good thing because it does expand and it's positive. It's not, negative. I don't wish the other team ill, but I'm just celebrating the success of my own team. So I think many people have had that experience where you can celebrate an athletic success that's not your own, but you feel just so happy about it.
Exactly. And I think by consciously trying to develop this ability, you actually start to become much more adept at actually doing it.
Yeah. So how do we do that when it's not, your national team, but it's just a colleague of yours?
Yeah.
And I think often, what we often tend to do is the opposite thing. We tend to envy other people's success. We tend to be jealous of them. And that's another big problem. I mean, that's one of the things that why oneness is so fantastic, because it conquers jealousy and envy.
Yeah.
If you have truly developed oneness, you cannot be jealous of another person because you have realized, we have the same source. We can talk about that later, like the realization of oneness also for me is the realization that we all have the same divine source. We all come from the Supreme, from God, whatever you want to call it, source. And if you truly experience that, I think a spiritual practice for that is necessary. But if you truly experience that, there is no more jealousy. There's no more envy. And then again, you can celebrate even the success of others.
And I think that really saves people from so much suffering as well, because very often when someone else achieves something that you perhaps would like to have achieved, or it achieves a promotion, or has some great success in the outer world, you know that you would love to do that and you would love to have that success yourself. But when someone else achieves that and you feel jealous or envious of them, you actually feel doubly bad because you feel sad that you didn't achieve the thing, but then you also feel incredibly judgmental towards yourself. Like, oh my God, I'm such a bad person.
Yeah. How can I be jealous?
How can I be jealous? And even amongst friends. And Sri Chinmoy once made a great observation that what we call friendship is often rivalry in disguise.
Yeah.
And very often you see that in groups of friends, that it's difficult even to develop true oneness within that group of friends. And when someone has some great success, often to your face, the friends might be really happy, but behind your back, they're actually going to be trying to pull you down. Or
exactly. And it feels like a thorn is being stuck inside you if you experience jealousy.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember when I was going to the acting school as a young man, I was accepted into the acting school in Amsterdam. And we had a guy there who had already achieved quite a bit of success in the acting world. And he was a little bit of a celebrity. He came from an acting family. And I couldn't help myself, but I was just jealous of him.
Yeah.
I was a complete nobody. I just came. I mean, most of our classmates weren't.
Yeah.
He was in magazines and people were writing.
Oh, was he?
He'd already played in like a series on television and very successful. And I remember my mother told me, just say it to him, next time you meet him, just confess your feelings of jealousy.
Your mother said you
My mom said that, and I listened to her advice.
Yeah.
And so the next time we were having dinner together with our class in a restaurant, and we were talking, and I think I raised the topic of jealousy, and I said, yeah. So I'm actually quite jealous of Thijs here. His name was Thijs. And it was such a liberating moment. People were like, you don't have to be jealous. Come on. He's just, it's just like one of us. But just for me saying it, brought it into the open, and poof, it disappeared. And from that moment on, I no longer suffered from the jealousy.
Yeah.
So one remedy might be just to confess it. Because that's immediately you feel that you're not longer that bad person who behind their back tries to pull them down or something like that, because jealousy often comes with that kind of inclination, to pull the other person down.
Yeah. And I think those sorts of negative qualities often multiply in the darkness.
Yeah,
it's like
that's right.
it's like we have this picture of as the dark places of the world.
Yeah,
and there's all sort of malicious things lurking down there.
it's like a colony of bacteria.
Yeah,
If you shine a light on them.
Yeah, and then you realize it's not actually ever as bad as you imagined it was.
Right.
You always, in your own mind, have this picture that your ill will, or your negative qualities, are so much worse, and that everyone would be so shocked and horrified if they even knew that you'd had a bad thought about someone else, or harboring these feelings. But when you actually bring it to the fore, people are like, oh, it's not even a big deal.
Exactly.
Don't worry.
You all have that, And another good thing but another thing you can do when jealousy hits you is to treat it in a positive way, is that jealousy makes you feel, it makes you aware of the things you want to achieve in your life. And that's a good positive side. So if you become jealous of somebody who has written a great article and you become jealous of that, it's like a message to you saying you should also do something in that field.
Yeah.
Because the fact that you become jealous means that you also want to achieve something. And they can take it as positive fuel, saying, wow, okay, that person has achieved that. At least I know in which direction my life needs to go, because, I won't be jealous of somebody who wins a motorcycle championship if I'm not at all interested in motorcycles. But if I am interested in motorcycles and I feel jealous, then it's like a little nudge saying life is telling you, hey, this field, you should develop yourself in that field.
And perhaps in some ways, jealousy is the negative aspect of admiration and idolization.
Right.
And so when you look at them in that way, when you see that there's someone that you really admire, the good thing to look at there, the thing to take away from that is, oh, so this person has some qualities that I would like to develop.
Yeah.
This person has some abilities or skills. And so use it as a positive thing to try and bring you up to a higher level and inspire you to try and transcend yourself, rather than when you're always looking at it in a negative thing, a negative form, and feeling as though, I wish this person did not have this.
Yeah, or you're belittling the others.
Yeah.
That's also a very universal thing. Oh, it doesn't mean much. Oh, I could have done the same.
Yeah. So Sri Chinmoy has a beautiful aphorism which captures this idea, and it's oneness never competes, oneness only completes. And so I think that captures that idea that in oneness, we don't feel that we're trying to defeat each other.
Yeah.
Instead, oneness allows us to transcend ourselves. It allows us to become a more complete version of ourselves. It allows us to become the best possible version of ourselves. So I think that's really nice for people to know as well.
Right.
So we can see that ancient people had an idea of oneness. They had an idea that they were part of some greater whole, and they felt a oneness and connection with all the life around them. And then they also had this idea that they could, through music and sound or some practices, they could transcend their limited self and connect into this field of oneness, or this field of consciousness. And that was much more explicit in those days, what they're doing. And I think then we see over time, people have still kept those traditions, these ancient traditions. So I think in some ways, when you go to a football game, you're acting out some ancient ideals inside yourself. When you go to a festival or a dance party or something like that, you're acting out some ancient shamanistic sense of a ritual. So these things seem to have like a really deep foundation in humanity that goes back to the very beginning. So I think we can definitely see oneness having played a big role throughout history. And you also see that in human beings, all of the conflicts that have come about from the in-group and the out-group. We've constantly been looking at the world as this is my tribe, this is my group, and you are the other.
Yeah. And
constantly been in conflict with the others. Yeah. And so I think that's still, as well as a fundamental part of human biology. And so if we do want to transcend those things and really create a world of harmony and peace and acceptance and tolerance, and all of these really divine qualities, we have to learn this practice. We have to learn and understand and be able to put it to practice. Or otherwise, we can create structures and we can make things on the superficial level look more harmonious. but there's always going to be this potential. There's always going to be this underlying sense of disconnection when people haven't developed that ability to expand and connect and value.
Yeah, it's like it's tribalism, polarity, polarization.
Yeah.
These are all things that really can come up to the fore really quickly. And
we're seeing it still all around the world.
Still over. Yeah.
Even when the world looks incredibly peaceful and we've got trade between all these nations, it doesn't take much for people's ancient tribal instincts to come to the fore and start again these conflicts between each other. Yeah. So I think this idea of oneness is a fundamental truth that we need to look.
Yeah, and of course, when you expand, first you can expand to the city, the nation, but then ultimately the ultimate expansion is the world, and that you include all the nations. So of course you may have, really deep feelings about your own nation that you're born in and the culture you're raised in. But ultimately, I think if you do practice real oneness, you have just as much admiration and appreciation for the qualities of other nations.
Yeah. And so some people might say, but how can we truly have oneness? I mean, I look at you and you are a separate physical being.
Yes, well, that is your fundamental question.
You've got your own wants and needs, and I seem to be a completely separate, different being to you, and I have my own wants and needs. And so are we not always just going to be in conflict and competition with each other? And so I have been thinking about these ideas.
Interesting. Let me know what you come up with.
So the first thing I wanted to think a little bit about is about who we truly are. And we've talked about this in different ways throughout the course of the podcast, because in some ways this is always the fundamental question. But if we look at ourselves and we have this sense of identity, so we've got the sense of self, we've got a name, we've got a job title, we've got a house we live in, we've got a country we live in. So we've identified ourselves with all of these external forms that give our life some sense of time and place and meaning. But we've also talked a lot, haven't we, about this spiritual practice where we're trying to connect with some deeper sense of consciousness within us. And I think one of the profound realizations you have through this spiritual practice over time is that you are not any of those things. You are not the fact that you like the color green, you don't like purple. You're not the fact that you live in this country and not in this country, because there's a good question to ask yourself, if for something to be truly you, it would have to remain the same if you were born in a completely different time, in a different place, and a different culture.
Yeah.
And so that takes away nearly all of the things people think of as themselves.
Yeah, right.
Because we've identified with all of these things that only matter because you were born in a particular time, in a particular place, and into the culture that you were born in. So if you were born in the 6th century in China, so the exact same physical being with the exact same consciousness, you would talk differently, you would like different foods, you would like different sorts of art and different sorts of music. And so I don't think any of those really are you then.
Yeah, that's right. I agree.
And so then the question is, okay, well, what is truly you? And I think meditation provides that answer, that when we go deep within and we sit there in pure conscious being, we start to sense that there's a sense of self that is transcendent and goes beyond all of those things that we identify as being part of our lives and who we are.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about this recently because there's 2 words in the English language.
Well, you don't think if I was born in 6th century China, I would still be a fan of the Dutch national team?
I don't know. And I also don't think
the
1970s rock music would have been on your brain.
Oh, yeah, that's true. That wasn't invented yet. But maybe I will start playing it,
So when we're talking about our spiritual practice and sitting there and being within our own deeper state of being, what you start to find is that state of being seems to be something that is beyond time and space. It is not limited simply by where you are at this moment and the experiences you've had. It seems to be something far vaster and more profound than...
Yeah, it goes more into the abstract.
It does.
So many times when I've had a really deep meditation, I just feel peace. I feel there's such a tremendous feeling of peace and wholeness. And I don't really feel myself as my body anymore, or as my mind, or as my thoughts, but I just rest in this beautifully, this kind of like dome of peace, this bubble of stillness. And it feels really, in a weird sense, it feels like this is who I really am. This is so familiar, this feeling.
And it is so interesting because it's beyond words and form.
Totally. Yeah.
And the interesting question for me is
just to cut you, sorry. And that's why in the beginning, when people I remember me when I had my first spiritual experiences, it is really hard to talk about them. And so they're so real. And so you want to tell everybody about them, but then you realize I don't have the language. They cannot be explained. And only later when you've had, maybe you've experienced it more and you've practiced the spiritual life more and you've read more, you kind of get the tools and the language for it. But I remember just frustrating myself endlessly by trying to explain to my friends and my parents, like, this meditation is fantastic, But I think it's a situation that many, people who start meditating come across. I've heard it many times.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And so the question for me is, I'm feeling this sense of consciousness within myself, and it seems to be the true essence of who I am. And the question for me is it somehow different to the consciousness that's in you? Because the consciousness that's in me is beyond forms and beyond words. It has no name. It has no shape. And it seems it's the type of consciousness that could be existing allwhere within all creation. So it could be that the same energy or the same consciousness that's inside me is the same consciousness that we would find existing inside a star. And we'd find it existing inside a frog. And we'd find it existing inside a stone. And we'd find it existing inside a drop of water. And we'd find it existing inside all of those myriad forms that look so radically different. But it could be that the essential essence of all of those things is the same.
Is consciousness.
Yeah.
It reminds me of this wonderful poem of Sri Chinmoy's, The Absolute.
Yes.
And the first stanza of that poem runs, no mind, no form, I only exist. Then it goes, now ceased all will and thought. The final end of nature's dance, I am it whom I have sought. It's such a mystical way of kind of describing, I think, what you talked about.
The state
of being, the I that I've sought. But it's just an I. There's no name and form connected to it. So it's pure consciousness of being.
Exactly. And for it to exist inside me, I can either take, there's only a few options. That it's just a complete anomaly. And I am the only person in the entire universe that is having this experience.
I'm sure there will be a few materialists who would really subscribe to that view.
And so we can touch on that. So there's a few different pictures that the scientific world is trying to come up with to try and explain this sense of this.
We're going into the scientific angle now.
Yeah, we can look at it from this side. And so trying to explain the sense of I-ness and the sense of being that exists within us. There's only a couple of different positions you can take. First of all, you can try and negate it. So if I was a pure materialist, I would say none of that is real. Even your experience of consciousness is not real. And it's just an epiphenomenon of the activity of the brain.
Yeah.
And so that's one extreme position you could take.
Yeah.
And then perhaps the other extreme position at the other end is what the panpsychists will say, and what ancient people for millennia have said, that no, and what I'm saying here as well, no, the same consciousness is in everything. It is in all existence. It permeates all existence. So this is the other end of the spectrum. And somewhere in the middle of those two positions, there's this idea of emergent consciousness. And so emergent consciousness says, well, okay, we would like to say that consciousness doesn't exist, but the problem is that we have experienced consciousness ourselves. And so then it makes it very hard to argue against it, because in some recent time, a couple of scientists wrote a paper trying to argue against consciousness itself. So consciousness does not really exist. And the argument was consciousness is simply an illusion. And so people then at some point had to point out the problem with it being an illusion is an illusion requires someone to experience. It requires a consciousness to experience the illusion. So it made no difference. It did not help anyone. And so I think very few people actually live as though they are materialists, because for materialism to be real, it means that every experience you're having of the world that seems to be in this field of consciousness you're experiencing the world, that none of that is real. It's actually all the electrochemical impulses in your brain. So everything you're experiencing right now, when you look out at the Rocky Mountains and you see this amazing vista in front of you,
I wish you could see it as well. It's really
all of that, if we cut open your brain, we should be able to find all of that in your brain somewhere.
really.
So we should be able to find the color green and this particular blue of the sky and this particular white of the clouds and the particular feeling of the heat of the sun shining in. All of that is in your brain somewhere.
Wow.
And the problem is people have really looked for all that stuff.
Yeah, it's
And
not there somehow.
It does not seem to be, the conscious experience of the world does not seem to be happening in the brain. And so then the question is, well, where is it happening then?
Yeah.
And then the other question that I like as well is, if the whole experience of the world is just happening in your brain, it's like when I look out into the world, it looks really large. Like there's a lot of space in there. And like if all of that was happening just in my brain, it seems very difficult that my brain could fit that sense of, it's like when I stand at the edge of the Grand Canyon. It's like, wow, I can fit the whole Grand Canyon in my brain. It's an amazing thing.
Well, I don't know. Maybe the brain has these extraordinary capacities to create depth or the illusion of depth.
So what the scientists who are interested in this field now, they're starting to realize it's really hard to explain all of this complex subjective experience of the world, which we call consciousness. It's really hard to explain it simply as neural activity. It seems like there's some connection, but it seems like they're not the same things. And the thing is as well is, how do you get a particular type of material from a completely different type of material? So everything that's happening in your brain is in the world of matter. It's all material. It's bound by the material world. But it seems the world of consciousness that you're experiencing is somehow different. It's not the same as the electrical impulses in your brain.
Yeah.
It is something, it's of a different type of experience. It's a different type of nature.
So this is another argument against the idea that it's all material.
Yeah, because it's like, how does this one type of substance create a radically different type of experience? Something that's of a completely different type. And so the people in the middle who will say, well, consciousness is emergent, they have to try and make an argument to say, well, there's not consciousness everywhere, because obviously that would be very problematic for them. But they would say that, okay, it seems as though when matter reaches a certain level of complexity and organization, that consciousness suddenly appears.
And when is this turning point?
No one has discovered where it
They
happens.
haven't discovered it.
They haven't discovered where it happens.
Sufficient complexity. I've also heard the argument. Sufficient complexity, and then consciousness emerges.
Yeah, and so there was an idea that if you were receiving information from the world through your senses, and then you were able to react to that information and that stimulus, that must mean that you're conscious. But then someone pointed out, well, it seems like a thermostat, on your kettle or something. That also does that.
Yeah.
It figures out, it can tell when it reaches a certain temperature, and then it will shut itself off.
So it would have consciousness.
It's the conscious thermostat property,
Yeah.
you could call it. So these are all different ideas that are trying to explain the experience we're all having. And the great thing about these ideas is they're not purely the domain of the scientists, because you have just as much right to have your say, because you are experiencing the exact same thing.
Yeah.
People are trying to explain what it means to be conscious and what it means to be here and existing.
It's approaching the problem from a different angle. It borders on philosophy, I would almost say.
Exactly. And so this is the point where it's not clear if it's the philosophers or the scientists who should be trying to answer the question.
So what's an argument against emerging consciousness? Well, emerges when it's sufficiently complex.
Yeah. So the arguments against that is it does not seem that there's a clearly defined point where consciousness should emerge.
Yeah.
And so you're always trying to say, oh, well, maybe it's because of this, or maybe because of that.
Yeah.
So you're trying to put something into a system. You're trying to say that something is popping or emerging out of the system.
And also the whole mechanism of how that is doing is completely unknown.
It's all completely unknown. And so what people have said, it actually makes more sense to go back to the very beginning and put consciousness in as the fundamental nature of reality. Because if consciousness is there fundamentally
from the beginning,
from the very beginning, and then from that matter appears, And then from matter, consciousness appears. It's like, oh, well, consciousness was there all
So right
along.
there, yeah, you don't have the problem.
You don't have that problem of when does consciousness emerge. And the thing with the emergent consciousness as well, it would have to be happening at all times, at all places,
Yeah.
in a very complex fashion.
Does it make a sound when it pops?
When
Consciousness?
it pops into being.
Like,
And the thing is as well, a true scientist would try and say we're looking for the most elegant explanation.
Yeah.
And so saying that something magically pops into being at some point in the system,
yeah.
that doesn't seem to be the most
Very
elegant and simple approach. If instead you take it back and say, well, consciousness was fundamental, and consciousness seems from our own perspective to be fundamental.
Yeah.
So when I go through all of those levels of self, and I let go of all my thoughts, and I let go of all of my attachments, and I let go of all of the things I identify as, it seems below all of those things in some fundamental position is the sense of being.
Yeah, because I remember as a child, you have the sense of me, right?
Yeah.
And the same sense of me is there throughout your whole life. That never changes. Like your likes and dislikes change, your thoughts change, you know, your taste of food, your culture, everything changes. But that sense of self, of when you point to yourself and say, that's me, that never changes. That always stays the same throughout your entire life. Yeah, so we are spiritual people. So I guess we subscribe to the view that consciousness is there from the beginning. Consciousness is the fundamental fabric, you could say,
of the universe,
of everything around us. And from that, I think the step to oneness is quite easy, because if everything is of the same fabric, everything is already from the beginning one.
Exactly. And so this was why I think that this argument that the panpsychists are putting forward is and the ancient people have realized this. Spiritual traditions throughout centuries have all said the same idea, that it seems that the fundamental state of the universe is consciousness, and all manifestation is a manifestation coming from that consciousness.
Yeah, in India you have the Advaita Vedanta, the one without a second. That is how the Brahman is described, right?
Yes.
So the Brahman is another term for God, but it's the impersonal God, the abstract God, and they describe it as the one without a second.
Yeah.
So that is the fundamental consciousness that is all pervading, and we can experience that. And in meditation, in these deep meditative states, you do experience this sense of oneness, that you yourself, all your divisions disappear, and all your likes and dislikes, and what separates you from others disappears. And you do feel the sense of oneness, and it's very much connected also to peace, I feel.
Yeah.
It's this deep sense of peace.
Yeah, when you're in that space, there's nothing that you need. There is nothing that you're wanting. There's nothing that you're grasping, and there's nothing that you're clinging to.
No mind, no form. I only exist.
And people to start with might find that would be a terrifying thing. And it's the same idea of being terrified of death in some way. Because in some ways, when you let go of all of those things, it's a small death.
Yeah.
And when I hear people talking about their fear of death, I'm like, what are you afraid of losing? Is it the fact that you really like Indian food and that you don't like Chinese food? Or is it the fact that you like to drive your car instead of walking?
I think it's the very fact of being alive that people are attached to. There is something really great about being alive and the possibilities that brings. And if you think that death is the final end to that, it's like, yeah, I can never experience anything good anymore. I can never have the same possibilities. And when you're alive, it's like every day could be something really good could happen.
So that it's the potentiality that lives in.
I think so.
It's the potential to have experiences.
Possibilities.
The thing is, for a lot of people, they're kind of sick of the type of experiences they're having.
Yeah, that's not paradox.
It's not that they're having a lot of good experiences. It's the potential loss of some future good experiences that they may perhaps have wanted to have.
Sure, but I think even below that, there is a sense of that being alive is a good thing. It's fundamentally good to be alive. I think that's very deeply ingrained in us. But I think the good news is death does not end that. So you can still be, and this maybe sound very contradictory, but death is not the end of life. Life is eternal. Life is immortal. Life goes on after death. It just takes on a different form and shape. So you go to a different world. You go to a different place. We can call it heaven. You can call it the higher world. You can call it the soul's loka. But life, you still go on after death. So
yeah, because the type of consciousness that you're experiencing at the deepest depths of your being does not seem to be the same consciousness that you're experiencing when you're experiencing day-to-day reality. So when I'm walking around in the world and I'm trying to get to the bus on time, or I'm trying to catch my flight, or I'm trying to get a sandwich, That's a particular type of experience of consciousness. But when we go to our deepest depths of our being, the type of experiences that we're having is radically different from that. And it's not bound by the experiences here in the material world. And so it's unclear that it's really, it does not seem that type of consciousness would be bound by the physical form.
No, and I think that's why it's so important to practice meditation, spirituality, to lose your fear of death. Because you go to that consciousness, you know there's a deep inner knowing that is eternal. That does not go away when you die. And, you know, all the spiritual masters, the yogis, the people who've practiced spirituality for a long time have talked about reincarnation. So that's the cycle of life and death. So death is just a temporary pause in your soul's journey. And then you get a new life with new adventures. We've talked about this in our reincarnation episode. But that also kind of signifies the continuation of consciousness. Because if consciousness was there from the beginning, it has to transcend death as well, right?
Yeah.
It's like death was not there before the whole, I guess, universe and creation was there.
Yeah, there's that great idea that the experience of waking up without ever having gone to sleep is the same type of experience as going to sleep and not waking up. So at the end of our life, we're afraid that we're going to fall asleep, but we're not going to wake up.
Yeah.
But we're not afraid of the experience we had at the start where we woke up without ever going to sleep.
Yeah.
So it seems like there's some strong correlation between these two types of experiences.
Yes.
And then there's the other great idea that I like as well, that it's much better to have many small deaths while you're alive rather than one big final death at the end of your
So what do you mean with?
So many small deaths is many moments where you've realized and you've gone beyond that sense of self, that identity. And these were the two words that I was trying to remember. And so there's two words in the English language. There's disenchanted and disillusioned. And so you often use these words when someone has fallen out of love with life in some way. They've seen the futility of things and they've become completely disillusioned with their job, with their career,
with the world in general.
With the world. But what those words actually mean, when you've become disillusioned or disenchanted, in some way you've broken the spell. So the spell that's kept you thinking that you are that identity, that you are the self that has to go to work and pay the bills and do all of those earthly things. When you've become disenchanted from that spell that you were under, where you thought that was all that there was, has been broken.
I think that happens what we call the midlife crisis.
Yeah,
that's often what
suddenly people have become disillusioned and disenchanted.
They don't believe anymore in the idea of that identity.
Yeah,
work and live and work, and everything will be all right.
So they start running around looking for different ways to find meaning and purpose.
Looking for experiences often.
Yeah.
Starting riding a motorcycle.
So perhaps if they could start to really become curious about who they truly are, that could start to answer some of the questions and start to provide some of the meaning that can fill that space. Because in some ways it is good to become disillusioned. It's good to wake up from the spell.
It's an opportunity.
If you spent your whole life believing something to be true, and then you find out just at the end of your life that the whole thing was just an illusion, you'd be slightly put out by the whole experience. So the earlier you can wake up to that reality, the better. But then you need to take positive steps.
What's the illusion here?
The illusion is that the reality that we give to our day-to-day activities, because the thing is, because they're solid and concrete and material, they're very easy for us to interact with, because we're in this physical form, in this physical body.
Yeah.
They're very tactile, the world around us. And so we can easily feel as though we're doing something.
Yeah.
And so this is that idea where people are just constantly trying to keep themselves busy instead of really starting to...
But isn't the illusion the fact that does not really have any deeper meaning?
Yes.
That ultimately they find out, hey, I thought this was going to bring me happiness and glory and would fulfill me very deeply, but then it does not fulfill them.
No, something
is lacking.
That's exactly the illusion. So that doing all of these things in the world will someday give you the peace of mind. Yeah. They'll give you the happiness. They'll give you the contentment, because happiness, peace of mind, contentment, joy, all of these things are internal states of being.
Yeah, they're not. This is the same problem as the emerging consciousness. It's like we think that if our being becomes sufficiently active in the world, happiness automatically emerges.
Yeah.
Peace and wisdom
It's
automatically emerge in the system.
We're looking in the wrong place, because
Yeah.
we need to look in a place where is also non-material. So happiness is non-material, or joy or bliss are non-material states of being.
They're inner qualities.
And so we're not going to find them just because we've lined up all of our outer affairs perfectly. It doesn't mean automatically that somehow from that bliss pops into being.
Yeah. And many people think that with age also wisdom comes. That's another, I think, illusion or misconception. Wisdom does not come with age necessarily.
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, it's an inner quality.
Yeah. So the interesting question though is that what is the brain up to then? The brain seems to be doing something.
I think the brain is a medium. The brain is it's a medium that translates consciousness into images and things that we can experience in the world.
Yeah. So that's a very good description, I think. And I think there's a lot of people who, on some level, they believe that science has basically just about figured it all out, just about figured out how the whole experience of consciousness is working. But when you actually look deeply into it, you realize people are so far away from truly understanding consciousness and our experience of reality, and then the way that it relates to the brain. So basically, there's 3 different ideas about the relationship between our brain and consciousness. So the materialists would say that the brain creates consciousness.
Yeah.
And so the question is, okay, well, how does it create consciousness? And where do we find this consciousness? Because it doesn't seem to be existing in the brain.
And another very powerful argument against that is the experience of near-death experiences.
Yeah.
So people have these unbelievable experiences when their brain is clinically dead.
Yeah.
So there's no brain activity.
And I think especially powerful ones where they appear in the room.
Yes.
And they can see everything that's
happening. They can see the doctors and they can later tell them, oh yeah, you removed this, you took that instrument when you were operating on me.
Yeah.
And they can never have experienced it from the brain. So.
Yeah. And so this is what's called the hard problem by David Chalmers.
HARD.
Yeah, the hard problem is, how do you get a non-material reality, but consciousness, from material matter?
Yeah.
And so this is one extreme position, that the brain creates consciousness. So there's not really any good evidence for that.
No.
It just seems
there's a lot of evidence against it.
But it just seems like, from our common sense experience and what we know so far, we're like, oh well, it's kind of must be there somewhere in the brain. But they're actually saying that consciousness now, we experience consciousness. So I'm experiencing the whole world out here, not inside my brain, but I'm experiencing it in non-local space.
Yes, I've heard that. Yeah.
And so non-local space is this very mysterious thing where no one knows exactly where
it's like the virtual, the digital space, cyberspace. It's non-local space. Right? We talk about cyberspace, but where is cyberspace?
Yes,
behind some door, or
exactly. So that's one extreme position. The middle point is, again, like the idea of emergent consciousness, is that the brain is like a receiver, and consciousness is being transmitted.
Yeah.
And so
that's what I said.
Yeah. So it's like a radio receiver. You can tune into your own consciousness. So your brain perhaps is perfectly tuned to just capture your consciousness. Because it would be terrible if you twisted the knob a little bit too far in someone else's consciousness. There's some static there. You're experiencing someone else's consciousness by accident. So that's a middle position. So the other position, which is at the other end of the spectrum from creation, transmission, is that your brain, what it does is it permits consciousness to act itself out in the world. And for me, that's really a fascinating idea, because that's stating that consciousness is something beyond, it's behind reality, it's transcendent, that it can come into being, and your brain is aligned in the perfect way.
But that's more the medium argument, I think. No?
Yeah. So they're 2 slightly different arguments.
Yeah.
But this one is about the fact that your brain is set up in such a way that consciousness can come in, and it can use your brain and structures in place in your brain to act out things in the world.
How does that differ from the receiver argument?
So in the receiver argument is not, the transmission and receiver argument is not very popular, because people find it much harder to actually explain how that all works, because it's like there's consciousness that is, some sort of it's like radio waves being beamed out, and that seems like unnecessarily complicated.
Right.
Whereas the idea that consciousness exists, And consciousness, because of the structure and the nature of your brain, this allows consciousness to become focused.
But it supposes that consciousness has a will of its own then.
It does. It supposes that consciousness is able to use the brain.
Yeah.
But then also perhaps other like biological systems and experiences and all of these other things that happen to us here in the earthly plane, they will also have an effect on it. But it's saying that consciousness is able to use the brain to aim towards certain goals, to be functional here in the world.
And so if you talk about you, who you are not that the brain, but you are that consciousness behind that is using the brain.
Yes.
To manifest itself.
Yes, exactly.
That's who you are.
But
that particular consciousness that's using your brain is still a different form of consciousness than the consciousness that's using your brain, Vajin's brain.
Yeah, and so this is what the spiritual traditions will say, is that the divine consciousness, which is all pervading, it was at some point one.
Yeah.
And then it decided to have the experience of the meaning. So the consciousness, infinite consciousness, of which all of us are infinitely and intimately connected. That's our truest nature. But that consciousness has, to bring creation into being, it has separated itself into an infinite number of packets, or an infinite number of individual units of being, let's say.
Individualized consciousness.
Yeah. And so and that's just simply the nature of the universe we're living in. We're living in a manifest material universe that is full of an infinite number of things. And if infinite consciousness, which was one, wants to experience the meaning, it then needs to separate itself so it can experience all of those things at the same time.
Yeah.
So it can experience the experience of being a sun. It can experience the experience of being a black hole. It can experience the experience of being a rainbow, a human being, a tree.
Rabbit.
All of these things have that aspect of the infinite consciousness having gone from the one to the many. And then that consciousness is able, and so this is the interesting thing, because we know that human beings are more conscious than other animals.
Right.
And so that explains, if we look at this idea of our brain being particularly tuned or having evolved to be able to manifest at higher and higher states of consciousness. So if we look at a centipede, or we look at an insect, or we look at a basic animal, their brain is far less complex, and it can only manifest a much more simple experience of consciousness.
So the brain is kind of like a tool.
It is.
Consciousness uses to express itself, and the more advanced and complex the tool is, the more of that consciousness can come through and create more complex things in the world. So
exactly. And so that's really cool, because because we see that evolution happens in the outer world. So we see that over millions of years, life has evolved to higher and higher levels of complexity. So we know that is going on. So we know that there's
even in the human world, we can see evolution happening right, in front of our own noses. Like if you look at athletic performances, they're always, records are being broken, technological innovations are happening. So yeah, as humanity, we are making progress.
And so what you would like to think is, if consciousness exists, consciousness should also be evolving over time. And so if you look at the consciousness in more basic life forms, moving up to where we are now, we do see that consciousness has expanded its ability to manifest itself. And then it's like, well, how is that? How is it that a human being is allowing more consciousness to express itself? And so people who take this position saying that the brain permits consciousness. So as our brain has become more and more complex in the material world, that has allowed more and more consciousness, higher and higher forms of consciousness, to manifest themselves here in the world. And so we see the results of that in our technology and all of our achievements. So to me, I'm not saying that any of these are exactly right or wrong, but they're just different ways we can look at the world. And it's just interesting, I think, because it starts to allow us to question things that have been unexamined. And So for me, this is a really great theory. I won't say it's true or if it's the exact right thing, but I think for me it's an interesting way of looking at how the development of the brain and the evolution of the brain has allowed higher forms of consciousness to manifest themselves.
So if we bring it back to oneness, how does it tie into the idea of oneness?
Yeah, so this idea that consciousness is fundamental.
Yeah.
So that for me is one of the greatest things. When I hear people coming from a scientific point of view and saying consciousness is fundamental, I'm like, this is so great, because thousands of years ago we had rishis in the Himalayas writing the Vedas, and they were saying the exact same thing. They said that consciousness is fundamental, and so you've got these two wildly diverse ways of looking at the world, and for a long time they seem very far apart, but I think as time passes they start moving closer together again. So the ancient spiritual wisdom has been shown through some of these advances and these ideas to have some deep and profound wisdom to it.
So I also want to talk about how do we develop oneness, because we have seen it's a really valuable quality. It conquers a lot of problems that we may have. It conquers loneliness, jealousy, also pride. The idea of pride can also be a very destructive quality. Sri Chinmoy once said, we've come into the world to conquer our pride or our ego. And in many spiritual traditions, the ego is also something that we want to transform or illumine. And also, I think that oneness also cultivates the quality of forgiveness.
Oh,
don't you think? Because if you feel your oneness with others, then if they make a mistake, you will immediately forgive it, because you know that you are actually one. And that solves a lot of problems, because I think the lack of forgiveness is what you foster anger, and you cherish anger and annoyance and irritation, and that creates more division. So if we practice forgiveness, again, from forgiveness we grow again into oneness. I think that one of the greatest examples of forgiveness from the spiritual traditions is Jesus on the cross, when he said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. So the highest form of forgiveness. These people have crucified you. You're an innocent man. You're not more than an innocent man. You're a holy man. You're a spiritual master, an avatar. And the ignorance of the world has crucified you. And at that moment, if you can say, Father, forgive them, they know not what they do. That is, to me, that's the highest form of forgiveness. And how do we develop oneness? Because we've talked about it. We've examined different theories and ideas about oneness, and I think I've written down some notes about how to cultivate oneness. And I think the basis, and we've mentioned this before, the basis is to have a spiritual practice, right? To pray and meditate, to dive deep within, and really go to that place of consciousness where all is one. You have to do some work. You have to create some spiritual discipline, because it just not does come up and grab you and say, here is your oneness. Now you feel one with the whole world. It seems that there is some work that we have to do in order to achieve that. And if you look at all the spiritual traditions and religions throughout the world, there always has been a call for either prayer or meditation or singing or chanting together, but some form of spiritual practice is necessary for that.
Yes, I don't think it is possible to experience true oneness on a regular basis, or to make it part of your life, without that fundamental practice, because you need to, on a daily basis, identify yourself with that deepest consciousness that exists within you. Because the more time you spend in your own limited self, in your mind, and thinking about things, or worrying about things, and stressing about things, all that does is keep you separate from.
Exactly. And I think also that's the difference between the mind and the heart. We are, in our present day society, we're very mind-based beings. So we operate in our minds usually. We analyze the world through the mind. And the mind is a great tool. And as we've said before in the podcast, it's a great tool, but a very poor master.
Yes.
And so we want to, where we can really experience oneness is in the spiritual heart. And it's interesting to see when we say I, we point to the spiritual heart. So the spiritual heart is actually located in the chest, in the center of the chest. The physical heart is more a little bit to the left, but the spiritual heart, the heart chakra, is located right there. So there's an intuitive or instinctive idea that we have that this is what truly represents us. If we say I, we point to the spiritual heart. We don't point here, the mind.
No.
We point there. And so I think that's also where we can experience true oneness
Yeah,
in the heart.
and I think it's a practice of identification. So you spend so much of your time identifying with the character of Abhinabha,
Yeah.
but you need to balance that by spending time identifying yourself with the vast infinite consciousness that exists within you.
Yeah.
And so bringing yourself there and just spending time sitting with that consciousness every day.
And then you can actually play with the character, right? You're not attached to the character.
Yes.
So when you're acting out your specific character with all its quirks and its beautiful qualities and its faults, you can look at it with a sense of detachment. You know that deep inside you are actually much more than just the outer character.
And I think that's very freeing for people as well,
Yeah.
because when you're always trapped inside this character and you feel as though you have no agency to transform or create something new, that's a very frustrating and limiting position to put yourself in.
Exactly.
And so having that vision that you are not just all of the regular everyday things you identify with, you're something much more.
Yeah, that's what people say. Don't take life too seriously. I think that's like, don't be too attached to the outer character.
Yeah.
Yeah. Another thing, what I wrote down is to put others' needs before your need. I think that's a great way to experience oneness on a very practical level. And I remember in my early days of my spiritual life, when I was in the acting school, I had a moment where I decided consciously to practice that, to put others' needs in front of my own. And how I did that was I would say to myself, okay, whenever somebody asks me to do something, or whenever somebody needs something, I will immediately do it. So it would be very simple things like, oh, we need a chair here. I would get up on my seat, I would get the chair, I would put it there. And, when I would hold open the door for people, or I would bring them some food if they needed, but I was determined to put others' needs in front of my own. And it really worked. I have to say, I really felt in those moments, I felt a very deep sense of connection and oneness just from, I think we can call it service. You're trying to serve, you're trying to be not from a place of like the slave and the master type of service, but just from a sense of oneness, from a sense of connection. And I think if we put others' needs before our own, that's also a great way to circumnavigate the ego, right?
Yeah, that's
because the ego is always this kind of. Chimwa describes the ego as a spiritual thief. It's coming in to steal our sense of oneness. It's like stealing away that reality where we're all connected. And so, in order to keep that ego thief at bay, one of the practical things is to practice service, to put others' needs in front of your own.
And I think for a lot of people that their life becomes infinitely better when they put something ahead of their own needs.
Yes.
And so whether that's their family or they have a child, you see that in those moments that person, now there's someone else in their life who is far more important than they are. And a lot of young people are terrified of that idea because they think, oh my God, if someone else was more important than I am in my life, that would be a terrible thing. But it's actually so liberating, I think, for most people, because most people have been, for many, many years, have been in complete control of their life and had full agency. And most people would not think, if you ask them, have you done a great job of that? Most people would say, I could have done better. There's probably a few ways I could have done better.
Yeah.
And so it makes your life actually a lot more simple when you've got someone else or something else. And so it doesn't have to be another person even. It could be an ideal, a cause, a belief, something that you believe is truly, truly valuable and that you're willing to dedicate yourself towards that goal or that ideal. Yeah. And that can also work in the same way where your petty desires start to become less and less important.
Yes.
And your life doesn't become less enjoyable because of it. It becomes more enjoyable.
And more meaningful.
Far more meaningful.
Yeah, very good point. And a third strategy to develop oneness is to be childlike. And we've talked about children and how children are a real good example of living in the state of oneness. And to be childlike is, again, something that it doesn't mean to be childish. You should not act childish or, throw tantrums.
No,
stuff like that.
No tantrums, no throwing your food on the floor.
Yeah, exactly. But to be childlike is to have the sense of newness in life, to have the sense of wonder, where when you wake up in the day, there's like everything is full of potential and possibility. And each day brings new opportunities, new adventures. There's an excitement there. There's a sense of wonder. And again, to do that, you have to go to the heart because children live in the heart. They show that by living in the heart, you get all this energy and this feeling of oneness. So again, it ties back to the idea of experiencing your spiritual heart. And I would say meditation on the spiritual heart is very useful. So just to breathe into your spiritual heart and breathe out from your spiritual heart, just to connect each breath to the spiritual heart, is a great way. And I've had that experience many times when I came out of a meditation and I felt like a 7-year-old.
Yeah.
No, I looked at the world and was like, everything was sparkling and new, and had this kind of like this feeling of newness. And yeah, I felt almost like the same wonder that I had as a 7-year-old.
Yeah, because you see that when a young child sees something they have not seen before. So it might be an animal or it might be a particular plant, but they're so fascinated by the newness and the novelty and the sense of adventure of experiencing this new thing. And you see they also have this wonderful relationship with animals.
Right.
Like young children, they just like so enamored with ducks and bunny rabbits and like
insects.
Like all of these things are so amazingly fascinating to them. And we, over time, we don't see those animals as they are. We just have this picture in our mind, like a very basic caricature. We just see it, a duck, cat, this animal. So we're not actually interacting with that unique, complex being that's in front of us.
Yes.
So we just
our mind has made a label. Like that is a cat, and all cats kind of fall into that category.
Yeah.
I've seen it. I know what it does. I know how it sounds.
Whereas for a young child, a cat or a dog or any of these animals, like I had a friend, and his daughter had this amazing way with animals, and you would turn away from her for a few minutes, and she would walk back carrying the duck, and she could go just right up to the ducks, pick them up, and just carry them around. And there's something so beautiful because the duck obviously felt completely unthreatened by it.
Yeah.
And then most adults, if you walked up to an animal or a duck, a lot of the times they'll run away because they have the sense that you're not really there. You're this big lumbering creature that's way up in its head and has no connection to the world. But these young children, I think, they can come over and they're so present that the duck is happy to interact with them.
Yeah.
And many times I saw her walking around carrying a duck.
Amazing.
I have never really seen before.
Yeah. So pick up a duck and see how you do with it.
Yeah, this could be a spiritual gift.
So anyway, this is a great, what you said is a great sense of experiencing the world anew. I think that's the being childlike. And Sri Chinmoy many times advised us to be childlike, right? To feel like a 7-year-old child. We even have a song about that.
Yeah.
To feel like a child again.
So I've actually got something that Sri Chinmoy wrote, which actually really captures this. So it's a little bit long, so please do bear with me.
Sure.
So use your heart-based listening. And so this is what Sri Chinmoy wrote. He said, when one sees beauty in everything, it is an aspiring consciousness, an evolving consciousness, illumining consciousness, fulfilling consciousness, divine consciousness. It means that one has come out of the gross physical consciousness. Actually, reality is nothing but beauty and oneness, beauty of oneness and beauty for oneness. When one has that kind of experience, it means one has transcended the boundaries of the physical, which is limited right now, and entered into a higher reality. When the boundaries of the physical have been transcended, only then does one have the experience of beauty in everything.
Amazing.
So I think this, for me, when I read that, I really felt that really captures an experience of truly experiencing the oneness of creation. So when you actually start to look around and see the beauty in everything, this is a very beautiful and divine state of being, and it shows in some way that you've transcended the gross physical consciousness.
Yeah.
And I think that's a wonderful thing to realize, that if you're looking around and you're seeing ugliness in the world and you're just seeing problems and conflict and strife, it's you. Like all of these things are existing within you, because I know at another point when Sri Chinmoy was asked about how he saw the world when he was in his highest consciousness, he said that he saw everyone as one. He saw everyone as the universal consciousness. And so we all have the potentiality to have these experiences. And I think trying to have that experience of trying to see the beauty in everything, because in every situation, in every place you're in, there is always some sense of beauty there. And if you can't see it, it's your own consciousness is hiding it from you.
Right.
And so I think that could be a great game to play to try and see beauty.
That totally ties
everywhere.
into my strategy number 4, which is to see the divine in everything.
Well, there we go.
There we have it. Strategy number 4.
And we did not script this, people.
Yeah.
It's purely
It's spontaneous.
spontaneous.
It's emergent. Comes out of this discussion.
Yes.
But yeah, to see the divine in everything is the same. I think it's synonymous with seeing beauty everywhere.
Yeah.
And we are all one based on that we all have the divine source. So if I look at my own hand and I see my 5 fingers, my thumb is the strongest, my little finger, my pinky is the weakest, but they don't have conflict. They don't fight. They're not, afraid of each other. They work together perfectly. And all my fingers work together perfectly because they've realized they're on the same hand. It's a very simple explanation for oneness. All my fingers are on the same hand. And likewise, I think all of us human beings, we're on the same divine hand of God. We are all fingers of God. We are all instruments in God's great orchestra. And each of us has a specific role to play. And if you realize that, slowly you grow into oneness just by feeling that we are all limbs of the same universal body. And that is actually something I wrote down of some of Sri Chinmoy's writings, which I found inspiring about oneness. Let's see if I can find it. Here it is. Okay, let's see. So, you must regard the persons around you as limbs of your own body. Without them, you are incomplete. You may feel that they are less developed, but they also have their role to play. Your thumb is much more powerful than your little finger, but the little finger also has its job. God has created 5 fingers. Although some are shorter and weaker than others, you know that only when you have 5 fingers are you perfect. Now your middle finger is the tallest. If you feel that for this reason you don't need your shorter fingers, then you are sadly mistaken. If you want to play the piano or if you want to type, then you need all 5 fingers. So yeah, now I realize where I have that idea from.
Yeah.
That is exactly the same thing. And maybe that's a beautiful thing to end with. Or do you have something else?
Yeah, I've got one other thing
Great.
that came up there that I wanted to mention, that it's really interesting that even in our language, we already have this idea, these musical ideas. So we talk about that we're in harmony, or I was out of tune with this person or that situation. And so there's this understanding that there is a way in which the world can interact together that is harmonious and beautiful. And then there's ways that are disharmonious. And it's really interesting because music is the practice of doing that, coming together with others and creating vibrations and sounds and trying to harmonize our states of being together. And I think that could be perhaps the 5th way that people could have oneness. So a big tradition from the subcontinent is the practice of kirtan or bhajans. And so these are all around the world now. You can go and find people chanting together, singing
spiritual songs, devotional songs.
And there is something that is, and this is another way that people have transcendent experiences. It's through playing music and getting lost in the music. And so that's another great example of having a true moment of oneness when you're playing music together and how enjoyable that feels.
Yeah.
And so I think that could be number 5.
Absolutely. We'll put it on number 5 to sing together. And that's something that we do very often in the Sri Chinmoy centers. We practice singing together. And yeah, I felt many times a sense of real oneness and transcendence when singing spiritual songs. So a great one for the 5th.
And then I think the churches around the world were always great for that as well.
Exactly.
There was something that they had that was really valuable, and people really enjoyed that, was coming together and making music and being in harmony and in tune together. And I did find it very funny. This was perhaps 10 or 15 years ago. There was quite a strong movement towards atheism around the world. And there was a group of atheists in London that had decided to come together, and they'd all left churches or religious structures behind. But they felt they were missing out on something.
Yeah.
So they made a weekly get together to sing songs together, because they felt as though they were missing out on something.
They were adopting the practices of the church, but not the belief system. Yeah.
I thought that was great, because they were obviously feeling that they were missing something in their lives, and that group singing and that group with that connection with others that comes from trying to harmonize with them is so beautiful and so enjoyable for human beings that they didn't want to miss out on that.
Good for that. Yeah, great. Is that everything that we've covered all the bases?
That's everything today.
That's everything today. Well, we've also decided to make this a bi-weekly podcast, we should mention. So we're not going to come every week, but we're going to come every other week with a new podcast.
Yes.
If you joined us so far, thank you so much for listening and watching. And if you like our podcast, please consider subscribing, leave a review, or tell a friend. And then we'll see you again next time in maybe another location. Who knows?
Yes. Who knows where we will be next time? All the best.
Bye.